Good afternoon and welcome to the Europe Center. My name is Christophe Crombez. I'm the interim director, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this talk about democracy in Catalonia. I am actually not going to be speaking very much today. I'm going to pass the word to our faculty affiliate at the Europe Center, Joan Ramon Resina. He will be chairing the session today, and he will be introducing and welcoming our speaker. Before I do that, I want to just make two practical comments. As you know, typically when we have a seminar, we have a Q&A session at the end of the talk. We are going to do that today as well. And just as we do otherwise, we will be using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question at any time for our speaker, then you can enter it during the talk or after the talk using the Q&A session. And Joan will then recognize your question and ask your question to our speaker. Before starting today's session, I also want to thank you for being here again for our penultimate session. There's going to be one more session during this academic year. Next week, we will have our last speaker of the academic year. That will be Piret Ehin from the University of Tartu in Estonia, and she will be speaking about populism in Estonia and how that goes how that interacts with the post-Soviet cleavages in Estonia. So that will be next week on Thursday at 1 p.m. That's all I wanted to say today. So now I just want to pass on the word to Joan, and he will be able to introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Christophe. And thank you for attending, all of you in the audience. We have been preparing this talk for quite some time, so we're happy that it finally takes place. Although, of course, it would have been much nicer if Gonzalo could be physically present. I'll refer to that event, to that circumstance in a minute. For now, let me just introduce him, although, in fact, I think that for many, Gonzalo needs no presentation. He was born in Chile, but he's a German citizen and a resident in Spain, where he has a lawyer's office in Madrid. In the last 4 years, he has been frequently in the news in connection with the Catalan independence referendum, or perhaps more precisely, in connection with its legal aftermath. As defense attorney for the Catalan political exiles, and in particular ousted presidents Carles Puigdemont and President Quim Torra, he's no stranger to the spying scandal known as Catalan Gate, being himself among the people who have been the object of surveillance by Pegasus, according to the news recently published in The New Yorker with the research done by Citizens Lab. Gonzalo received a law degree from the Universidad Nacional de Educación a Distancia in 2002. He then expanded this degree with a diploma in advanced studies in the Department of Procedural Law. Before this, he had studied political science and economics at Heidelberg. Currently, he is in the process of writing his doctoral dissertation at the University of Barcelona on the subject, the European Court of Justice as democratizing agent. Gonzalo has taught for years for the master's program at the Center of Studies of the First College of Lawyers in Madrid on the subjects of penal law and prison law. He is very active as a lawyer. He's legal counsel for the Palestine Liberation Organization and the Palestine National Authority. He's a member in the FIFA Committee for the Israel-Palestine conflict. He's advising attorney for the European Center for Human and Constitutional Rights in Berlin. Currently, he's representing the defense of various clients before the European Court of Human Rights, the European Court of Justice, the General Court of the European Union, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the African Court of Human Rights, the Court for Arbitration of Sport, located in Switzerland. Besides all of this unbelievable activity, he is also a prolific writer with several books to his name. The most recent of which is Cloacas Sí Claro, Suez, of course, which was published last year. And Besides writing books, he also contributes regularly to various international newspapers such as El País, La Voz de Galicia, Gara, Público, El Nacional Cat, the Berliner Tageszeitung, and the Italian La Repubblica. Well, as I said a moment ago, we had hoped to welcome Gonzalo physically at Stanford today, but unfortunately, the State Department has not granted him an entry visa. He's applied for it, but so far, no answer from the American Embassy in Madrid. It is hard not to speculate that the reason is probably related to his professional activity on behalf of his clients, and most likely is related to the talk that finally we're very happy to host today. Having said that, Gonzalo, thank you for being so accommodating and for speaking to us here.
Good evening or good afternoon there. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Christophe. And first of all, I agree with you that it will be much nicer to be there in person, but in any way, we can do it in the through video conference. And first of all, I would like to explain the reason for the title of my talk today. And this is basically because the Catalan independent movement decided that the only way to fight for their independence was through peaceful and democratic means, but within the frame of the European Union. That was also one of the reasons why I decided to defend their main leaders back at the end of 2017, after the successful referendum of self-determination celebrated on the 1st of October 2017, and the subsequent repression from the Spanish central government. Most probably, the biggest mistake of the Catalan was the lack of provision about the reaction that Spain was to have after the referendum. In my opinion, they never thought that the Spanish were to react in the way they have done it. First, with the police brutality on the same 1st of October, and then with the perverse use of all the powers and means of a state that has always had an extreme difficulty to accept, on one hand, the independence of its colonies, and on the other, the rules of democracy in which people got the right to decide their future. A lot have been said about the repression on the day of the referendum, and I don't think that it's necessary to go over and over again on a matter that is well documented and have been seen by millions around the globe. What I would like to talk is about other matters that have not been portrayed until now, such as the judicial repression executed through the misuse of the existing laws and the miscarriage of justice. I'm talking basically about lawfare and the use of the judicial apparatus to repress the Catalan independent movement and anyone close to them, but even us, the lawyers that defend them. The judiciary in Spain is one of the remeras of the Francoists, as the transition process has not affected them in many ways, especially in the way that the high jurisdictional instance understand the judicial function. From day one, the general prosecutor, in connection with the high jurisdictional influence, decided to play a role in the resolution of the conflict. Not to find a solution to it, but to repress the desires of a vast majority of Catalans. They decide to centralize the judicial repression in Madrid, both in the National Court and in the Supreme Court, to prevent that any judge in the use of its independence may result in a different way as what was expected by this highest instance. This was a clear violation of the right to a judge predetermined by law, and most probably was the beginning of the biggest mistake in the recent history of Spain, thinking that the Catalan movement can be dissolved through repression instead of through a negotiated and democratic way. The then President, Mr. Puigdemont, and several of his ministers went to exile. From that moment onwards, I commenced to defend them in Belgium, in Germany, Scotland, Italy, and other countries, as well as in European courts. The legal strategy has always been very simple, but Spain has not been able to understand it in these 5 years of legal battles. In our view, what the Catalan did is nothing more, but also nothing less than the use of their right to freedom of expression and of political participation. That was the essence of the referendum, and any criminalization of such actions is contrary to the European Union's law. We base this strategy in the rights recognized in the European Charter of Fundamental Rights and in the rights recognized in the Lisbon Treaty, a sort of European constitution which recognized the rights of national minorities to be treated in a fair and equal way. Based on these simple ideas, we have been fighting first the extradition in different countries, always successfully, and after that came the biggest challenge, to get the President Puigdemont and 2 of his ministers into the European Parliament as members of such a legislative body. Through this process, we have explored several ways to demonstrate that Spain has violated their fundamental rights and discriminate them because they represent a national minority which is not fully respected by the Spanish government and is discriminated, most probably also hated, by a vast majority of the Spanish people. Since 2019, President Puigdemont and 2 of his ministers are already members of the European Parliament, but we're still fighting to get their rights respected by the Spanish Supreme Court and by the Spanish authorities, who seems not to understand which are the democratic obligations of the member state within the European Union. And this is one of the biggest problems that Spain is facing. The hate, the discrimination, and the treatment given to the Catalan politicians is something that Spain can't deny, as it has clearly been demonstrated in all and every judicial procedure we have had in the past 5 years, at least in all those we have had outside Spain, and I make a big difference. We always lose in Spain, we always win in Europe. There must be a reason for that. As John said before, recently the New Yorker, in collaboration with Citizen Lab, a well-reputed center of the University of Toronto, has disclosed that more than 65 politicians, civil society leaders, and lawyers related to the Catalan independent movement have been spied through the Pegasus system. The reaction from the Spanish government was to recognize that at least 18 have been spied by the Spanish intelligence agency, and that a Supreme Court judge has authorized not to investigate any crime, but to obtain information of our activities. And I have said our activities because as their lawyer, I was also investigated for more than 2 years first by the Spanish intelligence agency, and then by who knows who through Pegasus system. All limits have been trespassed because the privileged attorney-client was violated not just by the intelligence agency, but also by the Supreme Court judge that was given the permission to spy us. And please be aware of that. There is an intelligence program to spy us, which has been authorized by a Supreme Court judge. But the judge was on one hand spying us, and on the other hand, the same judge was resolving the several judicial cases of the Catalan independent leaders that I was and I am defending in front of his own court. And this is the most crazy thing that we have ever seen in a state that called themselves as a full democracy. A judge who is spying me in the morning and resolving my motions in the afternoon related to the same Catalan minority leaders. And I have used this example because it is an actual one in order to portray how Spain has reacted to a fully peaceful and democratic movement that all what is looking is their right as a national minority to be respected by a state that is behaving in a way that is incompatible with any democratic standards. I'm pretty sure that you all seen by this example, but we have hundreds of examples of that. The Catalans, educated, supported, and hardworking people are committed to obtain the recognition the recognition of their rights to decide, and have long taken the decision to do it not only through democratic means, but also within the frame of the European Union and the laws governing the Union, which is very important. They have always said, A, we want to do it peacefully, B, we want to obey and do it within the laws of the European Union. The Catalans represent nowadays the biggest and most active democratic movement within Europe, and no matter how hard the repression may be from the Spanish government, they will not renounce to the way that they have chosen. Their commitment to peacefully resolution of this conflict and peacefully obtain the recognition of their right remains after 5 years of hard repression, of dirty repression and violation of all their rights. And that's because independence in the 21st century can be obtained in the way our own countries have done several centuries ago. Now, in a postmodern time, it must be done through legal and political battle. And that's something that the Catalans got very clear and are committed to. Their leaders in exile are committed to a peaceful fight in order to obtain the recognition of their rights, and also to do it within, and I'm sorry to insist, but this is important, within the frame of the European Union. Most probably, that's the reason why Spain is behaving in such a repressive way, as it still applying the methods they have used in the 19th centuries with their colonies. Both parties face a tremendous challenge, and I really hope that both are mature enough to understand and respect the other party's position and find a way to peacefully resolve a conflict that has lasted for far too long time. This conflict is not new. The way that the Catalans decide to move is new in Europe, it's been successful, and the way that Spain is behaving is the same way that they have been behaving for the past centuries with their colonies. What we are facing now is another step. Now we are in the final steps of a judicial battle within different courts in Europe, and we are hoping, we believe, we're convinced that the European courts will recognize the rights and the way that the Catalans have been presenting this confrontation with this Spanish government, which has been, and I go back to the beginning of this talk, in a way that is peaceful, democratic, and European. And this is maybe the reason why Spain cannot accept it, because it's putting Spain in front of its own mirror, and it's putting Spain in front of something that they have never accepted, that they initiate after Franco's death, the process of democratization, but they never finish that process and they never consolidate that process. And the result of not finishing that process and not consolidated is what is happening right now, where a lot of people has been under repression. There are more than 3,000 people facing different sort of repression and judicial repression for the use of their rights as citizens, as European citizens, and also for their willingness of independence. But also the case of this espionage, massive espionage, as it has been described by Citizen Lab recently and by the New Yorker, is a clear sign of how a state that is not fully democratic is repressing a democratic movement. They have spied us for 2 years. They have violated our intimacy for 2 years. They have break the privileged attorney-client for these 2 years, and who did it are people that are not democratic, but in the period of 2019, it has been done with the permit of a judge who at the same time was resolving the cases present in front of his court by the Catalan leaders, especially Mr. Puigdemont, Ms. Ponsatí, Ms. Comín, and also the second former president of Catalonia, Mr. Torra. It is important Also in this context, to give you some information that may help to understand the size of the conflict. In the last 5 years, 2 presidents of Catalonia has been deposed by decisions of courts, not for committing a crime, but by disobeying the imposition of a constitutional court, which is playing as a political agent in terms of the interpretation of the fundamental rights in Spain. We think that Spain is now playing a big role in the use of lawfare against their enemies, and for them, Catalans are their enemies, and the people who help them or defend them became also enemies. And I think that Spain got, through the Catalan case, a good opportunity to reconduct something that they left some 40 years ago when they stopped the process of consolidating a democratic system. And just to finish this first round of talk, I would like to say something. Spain is always claiming that they are a full democracy. I don't know any democracy that needs to be qualified as full, plain, or consolidate democracy. A democracy is either exist or not exist. And the Catalans has made the choice to become an independent state, a democratic state, and do it within the frame of the European Union. And this is the major challenge that Spain has faced most probably since the death of Franco. And we hope that at the end of the day, the efforts of the Catalan will succeed in terms of their rights, but also in terms of helping Spain to come from the darkness of this period that they are living right now. And today is a very important day for that. The former King of Spain has returned to Spain today after committing several crimes, recognized crime, that nobody would like to investigate it, giving him a protection that is incompatible with the rule of law and with a state that considers itself as democratic. So this is the first talk that I would like to share with you in terms of this, and maybe we can, if you consider, we can all open the floor to questions or to summarize this.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. If anybody has questions, please send them to me through the question and answer option. While I wait for anybody to intervene, I will ask you a question, Gonzalo, because it's a legal question that puzzles me, and I would like your explanation. You mentioned President Torra, who was sentenced he was disqualified from office for a period, I believe, 1.5 years, roughly, and also asked to pay a penalty of around 30,000 euros. His crime was to exhibit a banner asking for freedom of expression and in support of the political prisoners. He apparently has already, the time of his disqualification is already basically over. In principle, he should be able to run for office. But I recently read in the press that there will be a second trial, in essence, for the same quote-unquote crime. Is this even a legal possibility? I thought that within Europe, the legal system prevents people from being tried twice for the very same issue.
Well, normally, yes. If you're Catalan, sometimes not. And that's important to make clarification. For the Spanish authorities, President Torra committed 2 crimes. One was to disobey the Central Electoral Authority, who ordered him to take out that poster in support of the political prisoners, and they considered that he committed a second crime by not taking the same poster when he was requested by a court. So one action could be considered 2 crimes, and President Torra has been convicted for the second time. Also to disqualification from public office last week for the same poster that was outside the balcony of the Catalan presidential palace. There are 2 explanations for this. One, he got a bad lawyer, which was me, because I lost both cases. And the other explanation is that this was a violation of his fundamental right to freedom of expression as a politician, but it's also a violation of his right to participate in public activities and to present himself to electoral bodies, because this disqualification impels him not to be presented, for example, in the next election for mayor in Barcelona, or for any election that's called within the next year and a half. This is one of the quickest ways that the Spanish judicial high instance are using in order to repress Catalan people. And there are many convictions for what they call disobedience. I don't know how the president of a state like Catalonia can disobey an electoral authority or a court in terms of something that is the right and his obligation as president of Catalonia, which is to express the desires of the people who elect him for the post. The judges, the Supreme Court in Spain and the High Court of Barcelona and the National Court, they are making politics with all these changes, because at the end of the day, nowadays, in my opinion, there are three presidents who are legitimate president of Catalonia. President Puigdemont in exile, President Torra, who has been has been taken out of office, and also President Aragonés, who was elected last year. So at the end of the day, they are creating, instead of using the law to resolve problems, they are using the law to create new problems, because they don't understand that this is not a judicial problem, it's a political problem. Political problems need political solution, not judicial one.
We have a couple of questions. Many in Catalonia expected the European Union to play a more forceful attitude towards the judicial excesses of the Spanish system, but it has avoided action in most cases except when absolutely forced. The European Union criticizes other European countries such as Poland and Hungary, but has ignored similar behaviors by the Spanish government and judicial system. The recent the Catalan Gate discovery is another case where the EU seems to completely ignore the situation. Do you think that there's any chance of this attitude by the EU to change in the future?
Well, the European Union as a concept, I think, is the frame where we should fight. And also there are certain institutions of the European Union that are the places where we should take our cases and where we should make the whole fight. But on the other hand, it's a political institution. I mean, we have people like Josep Borrell, former minister in Spain, who is the person in charge of the foreign relations of the European Union. Well, he's totally fighting against the Catalan independentists. But I don't think that we should evaluate the European Union just by the way that certain politicians behave. We should evaluate the European Union from another perspective. I'm sorry, but where I am, sometimes it's crowded, it's very loud, but I always said to the Catalan following: if we would have not been in the European Union in October 2017, the jails in Spain will be full of Catalans. The repression would have been, without hesitation, much brutal than what it has been, and they would have never got any refrain from going even further down the road. The European Union, even when it's not giving us the recognition that the Catalan desires need at this moment, at least is giving us certain sort of protection. If Spain were to be out of the European Union at this moment, maybe not even this video conference would have taken place.
Yes. Can you comment on the lawsuits against the mayors who had referendums in their municipalities?
Well, which mayors? Because certain mayors in Spain has also referendum and there are no lawsuits against them. I mean, if you're talking about mayors in Catalonia, yes, there are also certain criminal procedures going against them for holding this referendum. But as a matter of fact, some 3 months ago, other cities in Spain held referendums and they were celebrated by everybody. So there are a double standard situation. One is the way that the law is applied in Catalonia, and the other one is the law, how it's applied in the Spanish state, which is not comprehensive of Catalonia. So this is a clear indication of the lawfare that I was talking at the beginning, because I don't understand which would be the difference between a major held in a referendum, let's say, for example, in Girona, than in Badajoz. The only difference is that it's an independentist major. When an independent major calls for a referendum in its town, he will face criminal charges. If the same situation is done outside Catalonia, there will be no criminal charges, and they are risking the deposition of the post and also the prohibition to participate in political activities, which is also not a very democratic result of just being calling for a referendum.
So we have a question. Somebody says that he's curious about the vision for independent Catalonia in terms of supranational governance as a member state of the Union, of the European Union, of NATO, etc. Or would Catalonia be independent from those structures? And if Catalonia were to join the European Union and NATO and so on, is there a legal political fast track to membership, and what would be the repercussions of a lag time between memberships?
Well, I think an independent Catalonia will be an asset for the European Union, and I think for Catalonia will also be good to be part of the European Union. So I think it's a mutual interest if that's if the moment comes. I mean, I would like to remember that when the referendum took place in 2017, certain European authorities said there is no room for an independent Catalonia in Europe. And when the Brexit took place, immediately they said an independent Scotland will be welcome in Europe. And don't forget something, Catalonia, it's bigger than many countries within the European Union. We forget something very clear. President Puigdemont was elected as member of the European Parliament. He was the 15th most voted member of the European Parliament within the whole European Union. He got 2 million votes of European citizens. Many, if not most, of the member of the European Parliament never got in their mind to get such an amount of votes, because there are small countries that are member of the European Union. I give you an example: Malta, Luxembourg, just on the top of my mind. So it's not a matter of size; it's a matter of interest. Whether an independent Catalonia should take place part of NATO. As a lawyer, I may not say what is best or what's not, but as a citizen, I would say, for what? For what should they be member of NATO? For what should they be member of the European Union? I think that's the best frame to the best legal frame and political frame to be within Europe, but there are two different structures.
Yes, if I may insist, I think that the question really was more interested in the time in between. So between applying for membership, let us say, Catalonia becomes independent from Spain, would Catalonia then automatically be part of the Union, or would it have to apply? What happens during the time of application while they are nowhere in between two different phases?
Well, I mean, what happened in between? There is a complex situation, because if Catalonia became independent now, all of their citizens are already European citizens by law. So it's a very complex situation from a legal point of view, because this is not a legal problem, this is a political problem. And the political solution could be an immediate, a complete, or a fast-track process, which the European Union, when they want it, they can do it, or also that they consider that it has always been part of the European Union. I mean, the whole population of Catalonia are European citizens. So there is no problem of nationality because they are European. They held European passports. There is a problem to sort certain treaties. Yes, that's true, but that's something that the European Union can do it very, very quick. And I'm pretty sure that in between there will be solutions. The European Union has the flexibility to always find a solution when they are interested in finding that. And I'm sure that they have in mind some things for the case that Scotland became independent. So it's applicable also for the case of Catalonia.
Thank you. So far, there are no more questions, and so I'll ask you one myself again. And it has to do with, again, with the Catalan gate, the Pegasus spying on a number of citizens. We don't really know how many will turn up in the end. But in relation to the previous question about, the political role of the EU in its response to all of these issues emanating from the conflict between Catalonia and Spain, recently it has turned out that the EU ombudsperson has decided not to pursue this matter, not to investigate the use of Pegasus by the, allegedly by the Spanish state. Not allegedly, now it's recognized by the Spanish state. What is your opinion about the ombudsperson who's supposed to be there? It's a role for the protection of citizens, not being willing to investigate.
Well, let me be clear. The ombudsman who has decided not to investigate and said that everything was in accordance to law was the Spanish one. The European one, in relation with the Catalan gate, has not pronounced himself, but the European Union, the European Parliament has been very clear and is being very clear and will be even more clear that the use of Pegasus is a criminal activity and that this is against all the fundamental rights in Europe. I think the major problem that Spain is facing now is how to explain to their partners that their partners consider that this is a major crime against the fundamental rights and that Spain is justifying that on the fact of being Catalans. So Pegasus scandal, the Catalan gate, is a big problem for Spain, but it's also a big opportunity for Europe to show how far they want to be and how strong they want to be in the protection of the fundamental rights of the European citizen, whether they are Catalans or Germans. And everybody has a very clear, crystal clear position in terms of the concept of the use of Pegasus, except some Spanish members of the European Parliament from the right wing, and also the Socialist Party. Some members of the European Parliament coming from Spain, from the Socialist Party, they're justifying what is unjustifiable, the use of Pegasus, and this is a conflict that they are having, a political and a moral conflict with their partners in the European Union. So we're waiting. We have said very clearly in the last 3 weeks, this is just starting. Spain is trying to cover up this situation, but this is, believe me, this is just starting. We just found out, for example, the case of this judge who has been investigating me, not for a criminal offense, just to obtain information about me and my clients while he was resolving our cases. This will come into the European courts in the next few days, next few weeks. This will also have a very strong impact in the political position of the European Union. And we think that we should not get worried about the timings, because the time is running on the favor of the Catalan independent movement. And also, at the end, I'm pretty sure that the European Union will come to have something very strong to say in this case.
So we have a very basic question. I think that it's worth tackling this one, which is, in retrospect, was it worthwhile calling the Catalan referendum in 2017? Has anything been achieved as a result of that referendum? That's part of the question, part A, then we'll come back to part B.
Well, maybe that's a question that has to be addressed to the Catalans and to President Puigdemont. But if I may answer that, I'm not a Catalan. I like them and I try to help them and I try to protect them in the way I can, but sometimes we forget a very important point. The referendum was to decide whether they would like to be independent or not. Is anybody prepared to ask that to George Washington or to Simon Bolivar or to Bernardo O'Higgins or to Jose San Martin? Is it worth to try to be independent? I don't know, but this is a very European question. It's not I mean that question nobody can ask it in America. I'm sorry, with all the respect, that I was just giving a talk the other day, and I said the problem of the Catalans that you don't know how to get independent because you have always been part of the colonial problem, not of the people who has been colonized. I mean, we that has been brought up in countries that has been independent, we learned from day one the importance of taking the decision to be independent. One thing is to take the decision and the other one is to obtain the independence. This is a process, sometimes take long time, sometimes take less time. In the 19th century, it was through wars. In the 21st century, it's through legal battles. But taking the decision of willing to be independent is something that's always worth because it's the putting together a common desire. We want to be a country. We want to be a state. We are a nation. And I think that's very valuable. And I don't see how a Catalan could regret to express their desires. And that was an expression of desires. They vote to express their desire to become independent. And then came an independence statement, which is the route that they pretend to follow in order to obtain independence. So was it worth? Well, I don't know, because is it worth to express how we feel? Is it worth to express what we want? I always say yes. And I think that the vast majority of the Catalan would agree with me that it was worth to ask them, and if necessary, to fight for that in legal and peacefully way. But really, it surprised me that was a European question. For sure, it was a European question because nobody in America will, and I'm saying America as a full continent, nobody in America will say, was it worth to think of becoming a country? I think, yes, it is worth.
It is not, I'm not permitted to disclose the identity of the question.
Because that's a contrast that I always make with the Catalans. I said, look, you were educated in the European mentality. Europeans were always having colonies, and we were brought up on an American mentality. We always wanted to get independent, and we like to be independent.
So in connection with this, I mentioned the part B. So in connection with that earlier part of the question, so the part B is, what is the political future for the politicians who are now in exile?
Well, they represent, I think, they still represent the desire of the Catalan people. They went to exile not to avoid prison, they went to exile to continue the fight. And I would like to remember something. When I met President Puigdemont, for the first time, he was in exile. And I said, well, I hope that we can win. And he said, don't worry, just think that this fight is giving us more days. This first legal battle is giving us more days to continue making aware everybody of to be part of an independent country. And I think that their future is linked directly to the desires of the Catalans. And as long as the Catalans decide to be an independent country, they will have their leaders fighting in exile and returning sooner than later to Catalonia to demonstrate that they succeed in the process of bringing the independence to Catalonia. But that depends also not only on the judges, not only on the lawyers, but also depend on the Catalan cities.
So we have a couple more questions. what are some of the political reasons for the low European Union support for the Catalonian struggle?
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
So what would be some of the political reasons for the low support from the EU for the Catalonian struggle?
Well, because they like always to keep the status quo, and the European Union sometimes forgets something. It's a union of, it's not a union of governments, it's a union of citizens. They forget that the core idea of the union is represented in Article 1, 2, 3 of the Lisbon Treaty, which is, as I said at the beginning, is a sort of constitution, and the European citizens support this idea. The European government may not, but how many times government don't represent the public interest, don't represent the citizen interest? We are seeing that day after day. Not always our governments represent our interest. The support that President Puigdemont had every time that he goes to Germany, to France, to Italy, or in Belgium, or in Switzerland, or last week, 2 weeks ago in Austria, is tremendous. Maybe he's not getting the support from the government, but he's getting the support from the citizen. And the European Union should look more into be a European Union of citizens rather than a European Union of governments.
So the next question touches on the question of demographics. Some people say that the demographics are moving, in fact, against Catalan independence because the percentage of Catalan speakers is declining. In this regard, independent support would decline and independence would become unlikely. What is your opinion about this?
Well, I mean, I think there is an attempt, a very clear attempt from the judicial to restrict the use of the Catalan language, because they know that the language in any country is very important, and it's the vehicle in which around which you build the identity of a nation. But on the other hand, I don't see that this would be the reason for succeed or defeat. I mean, the Catalan language is vastly spoken in Catalonia. Most people speak it, if not all. And even myself, I never learned Catalan, and I understand perfectly well, and I don't like people to change me the language. So it's a political attitude and a human attitude towards the language. But at the end, the demographic of the language, I think if we said that everybody who speaks Catalans will be independent, then Catalonia is already independent. And if we said that less people will speak the language, Catalonia is less likely to be independent. That's what the Spanish authority think about that. I disagree that the language is getting into danger, and I think, but in any case, I think the language has to be need to be defended every single day as a sort of identity, or a vehicle of the construction of the national identity.
Sovereignty has benefited Portugal since 1640. The time when Spain or Castile rather had to decide which of the two sides of the peninsula, whether the Atlantic or the Mediterranean, to keep within the state, right? So Portugal becomes independent while Catalonia is defeated. Has Portugal since then, or in recent times, been an ally to the Catalans now within the European Union, for instance?
Well, I think there are a lot of links between Catalans and Portuguese, and also they have things in common also, which are to have such a big neighbor in between. But the political support, I don't know, because I'm not part of the political team of President Puigdemont. I assume, yes, that they have been having that. But when you go to Portugal, or when you meet Portuguese people, they all know what we are doing and how we are doing, and they are very well aware of the situation in Catalonia. So I think if that's a sign, yes, they have been supported.
Okay. I don't see any other questions, so let me invite the audience to send me a few more if you're interested in any aspect of the talk. Otherwise, I threaten with taking over and asking myself more questions. Okay, well, people are thinking, since you are so close to President Puigdemont, you have accompanied him in Brussels, you have been his legal counsel all along since exile. Some people believe that from a political point of view, at least seen from the Catalan establishment, he's no longer really a player, that somehow he's, that charisma that he had and that capacity to draw people to his project has died out in a sense. He has been blocked so many times from not just from the Spanish state, but from within the Catalonian political establishment, that he's been sidelined, and he's no longer the important feature that may someday be able to gather people around and bring them again into some kind of movement. Is this the way you perceive it?
Not really. I mean, let me give you an example. On the 24th of September, 7 months ago, when he was arrested last time in Italy, in Sardinia, he was released, and we couldn't hardly walk through Sassari or to Alger because of the support of the Catalan citizens that were going there. And the support that he's having is very important. And sometimes we are confusing the political establishment with the public and citizen support. And when the first time that President Putin came to Perpignan, there was more than 250,000 that went over to receive him. And every single day, Catalans are traveling to Brussels to see him, to speak with him, or to make himself just to make with him a picture. But I think we should not confuse what is the establishment, even of the Catalan politicians, as was this the public support. Don't forget something, that the Catalan establishment, the political Catalan establishment, is part of the state. And President Puigdemont is, of the Spanish state, President Puigdemont is supporting a totally different idea, and he's trying to build a republic rather than to manage the part of Spain that is being allowed to by the Spanish authorities. So I think, to know exactly which is the support of the president, let him come back.
On that line, is he going to come back anytime soon? And if he did, what are the odds that he would not be jailed, subjected to a trial in defiance of the various decisions made by the various European courts?
Well, we are trying to create the legal framing where we can guarantee that that doesn't happen up to a point, because with Spain breaking all sort of rules, a full guarantee there will never be a full guarantee that he will not be jailed. I mean, one of the major problems in these 5 years that Spain is not even respecting its own law. So when it's come to President Puigdemont or the Catalan politicians. So at the end of the day, at a given point, there will be a decision once we finish this process in the European courts, and that will be the moment to take the chances. And let's see. I mean, that will also depend on the support that the Catalan citizens give to him more than what the Catalan establishment give to him.
We are approaching the end of the session. I don't see any more questions, so I will allow one that is, rather personal, and that is, to what extent your association with the Catalan process has changed or somehow rerouted your professional career, and how do you see yourself as a citizen? You're a European citizen, but you reside in Spain as a resident of Spain, being potentially the butt also of aggression, not just juridical, but also simply social.
Well, I mean, I have always been in defending the victims of the crimes, and in this case, and the victims of aggressions, and this is not different with the Catalan. leaders. How does it change? Well, Spain is asking me for a very high price to defend President Puigdemont and the other exiles and the other Catalan leaders. But at the end of the day, I always say the same. I am on the right side of the history, and nothing can pay for that. Maybe I should be paying for being on the right side of the history.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. It really has been a pleasure listening to you. Again, as I said at the beginning, we hope that at some point you'll be able to be admitted into the United States and we'll be able to welcome you physically here on our campus.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Joan, and thank you for Christophe and Alisa and Shannon for organizing all this. And I'm really looking forward to go to the States. I really like the States, and every time that I go there, I have wonderful time.
Thank you, and have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.